Welcome to this series on how to use Redux with React. In this video, we will learn about the reducer rules and immutability and what are the things we need to keep in mind while defining a reducer. So, what are some of the important rules while defining the reducer functions? Calculate the new state value based on the state and action arguments. So we remember in a reducer, we get the existing state and the action. So we need to compute the new state based on these two parameters only. It must not have any asynchronous logic, must not have any side effects like call APIs or modify non-local objects or variables, must not call any non-pure functions, example date.now, math.random, etc. So why are we having these kind of restrictions? So the basic purpose to have these kind of restrictions is that there is nothing outside it that is coming in. So whatever was the previous state, the state and the action being the JSON, should be enough to generate the new state. So if we have any asynchronous logic, then the logics will start to get a bit messed up. The orders would change. APIs, if we call any APIs, some different values will come in. If we modify non-local objects or variables, it would have impacts. And if we call non-pure functions like date.now, so every time we run it, we'll probably get a different value. So we cannot call these non-pure functions. Non-pure functions meaning here whose output changes whenever we call it, can change. So this is the first set of rules. Second important rule is not allowed to modify the existing state. So the existing state should not be modified. Instead, make immutable updates by copying the existing state and making changes to the copied values. This is a very critical requirement and we should always keep that in mind. So what we will now study and learn are 4 common types of updates that are required in the reducer depending upon the kind of action and how do we make it. So we will make immutable updates by the reducer for when we update a JSON, when we insert an item in an array, remove an item from an array, and update an item in an array. These are 4 of the most common use cases and we will see how to do it in a reducer and then look at examples as to how to solve it. So if we want to update a JSON, so our state is a JSON and we want to update it, then how do we do it? Make a copy using the spread operator and then add the new fields or the fields being updated. So for example, this is our state. It's a name, quantity and price. And we want, what do we want to do? We want quantity to be incremented by 1. So how will we do it? We have used the spread operator and then add the field that is being updated. So what this will do is make a copy of this JSON and then quantity will be set to object.quantity +1. So this is how we will do it. So similarly, if we want to add a new field to the JSON, so here we want to add discount with the value as 2 to this JSON. So we have spread the JSON and then added this field, the new field, to the JSON. So this is the standard way when we update a JSON. What's the next one? Insert an item in an array. So to insert an item in an array, we would slice the initial items in the array and spread them, add the new item, and then slice the remaining items in the array and spread them. So what does that mean? So suppose we want to put in at index, then we slice and spread them. So this array would get copied. Then we put in the item and then we slice and spread the remaining array. So this is the way we would insert an item in an array. The third is to remove an item from an array. So to remove an item from an array, we will filter the array. And why do we use filter? because filter creates a new array. So standard array.filter, and we filter out that item. So we have removed an item from the array. Fourth is if we want to update an item in an array. So let's say the array is an array of JSON and we want to update that item. So how would we do that? We will use map, and then we will update the item using the update JSON approach that we saw earlier. So the first approach that we saw, the update JSON, then that is what we will use. So array.map item goes to if item.id is not equal to action.id. So if we do not want to update this item, we return it as it is. Otherwise, we spread it, put whatever changes we want to do in that JSON and return that. So we have used map, we have updated the item, that specific item, using the update JSON approach. So this is how we've used these 4 common ways of doing it. So just go through them in detail. Next, let's look at a few exercises as to how to do it. So we have this store stocks, which is an array, and it has name and quantity. So the name of fruits, so this is the stocks of fruits. We have the name and the quantity of it. Now we want to define an action called sell, which updates the quantity. So the type is sell and the payload will be the name of the fruit. So which fruit are we selling? So how do we define this using the approach? So in this approach, what would happen? In this approach, we would be updating one of these JSONs. So we need to apply the process number 4, which is update an element in a array. So how do we do it? So the way we will do and test it is we will just write a reducer and we will run it with the Redux dev tools and test it using the dev tools. We don't need a front end to do it. So from the dev tools, we will dispatch the action and test it. So we have the initial state and now we define our reducer. So if action dot type is equal to sell, then what do we need to do? We will need to update it. So we will need to do our stocks. So let's say let's call it const stocks is equal to state dot stocks. So this is our state. Next, what do we want to do? We will need to use map. So stocks dot map, and what do we do here? Item goes to item dot name. So item dot name would be the name of the fruit is equal to action dot payload dot name. Then what do we do? Then we will need to spread the JSON and do it. So we will just spread item and quantity will become item dot quantity -1. So that is what we do. Otherwise, we just return that item. So that is what we have done. So we have gotten our new stocks. Let's call it, say, let stocks 1 is equal to this. And now we will need to return it. So return stocks is stocks 1. Else we will just return the state. So this should be a reducer. So now let's go ahead and test it. So how should we test it? In our index.js, we have configured this. So we will be able to run the Redux dev tools. And we have configured a main component which will get fired. So this is the main component that we used in the earlier video, so that the application gets loaded, the store gets loaded, everything happens. So let's just run it. You can use any other application or the same one. So this is the application. We are not concerned. We are more concerned. So let's just open it. So this is our Redux dev tools. Now what do we want to check here? What is our state? So this is our initial state, we can see it. Now we need to dispatch an event. So let me put the slider off and dispatch an event. So what is the event? It is cell, and what is the payload? Is name is say orange. So if we send this payload, what should our state become? The state should become quantity is 2. Now if I dispatch it, you can see the apple is 1, banana is 2, and orange has become 2. Now if I send another event, let's say with, again let me dispatch orange, it becomes 1, it becomes 0, and so on. We could send another one, let's say banana, and if we dispatch it, now banana has also become 1. So this is how we are testing it. So next, what do we want to do? While updating the quantity in the action cell, remove fruit from array if quantity is 0. So if the quantity of that fruit has become 0, we do not want it in stocks also. So this is the change we need to do. So let's go back. So in our reducer, what do we want to do? Now we would use a filter here. So we want to, so let stocks 2, let's call it as stocks 1 dot filter. And what do we want? We want stocks such that st dot quantity is greater or equal to 0. So this is the stocks we want. So let's, and now we will return it as stocks 2. So we have used the filter here to update it, and we have done it. Remember, filter gives a new array. Let's go back and test it. So now let me refresh it. So the state has become, it's a fresh state. And now let me dispatch an event. So type is cell, payload is, name is, let's call it say apple. And now if I dispatch it, the quantity has become 0, but why has it not gotten out of the stock, the state? If we go on the state, we can see it again. Now why are we getting it? Let's check it. We put in greater than equal to. So let me do that again, and now let's test it. So if I refresh it, we get the state, the original state. Now let's dispatch our event. Cell, payload is, name is apple. Now if I dispatch it, you can see the stocks have gotten updated. Apple has been removed. Let's now dispatch a banana, sell a banana. So banana has become 1, which is fine. Now if I dispatch it again, the banana will become 0, which is fine. Next, what do we want to do? We want to define a new action called buy. And what does buy do? Updates the quantity if exists, otherwise inserts a new fruit. And what does it have? It has a payload, type is buy, and it has a payload with the name of the fruit and the quantity. So let's go back to our code and define it. So in our reducer, we can also now start defining the other case, else if action dot type is equal to buy. So if we get a buy action, what do we need to do? So the two things we need to do, if it exists, we will update, otherwise we will insert. So how do we figure out whether to update or to insert? Let's use a find first. So const stocks is equal to state dot stocks dot find st such that st dot name is equal to action dot payload dot name. So now if this find is truthy, so let's call it let st is this stock. Now, if this stock is truthy, which means we have found this stock, then we just need to update it. Now, if we want to update it, what do we need to use? We will need to use map. So let's do that. If st. So if st is truthy, then what do we want to do? Let stocks1 is equal to stocks dot map. And what do we want to do? Item goes to, if item dot name is equal to action dot payload dot name. So we will find that. Then what do we need to do? Like we did earlier, we will just spread it, spread the item, and quantity we'll update it with item dot quantity plus action dot payload dot quantity. Else what do we do? Else we just return the item. So this is what we are doing. If item dot name is payload dot action dot payload dot name, if this is that fruit, then we spread the item and we update it item dot quantity plus action dot payload dot quantity. Otherwise we just return that item. So if st is truthy, this is what we do. Else what do we do? If st is falsy, which means this item was not found, we need to push this at the end of the array. So we will again use the spread operator. So let stocks1 equal to, we spread this whole array, which is what array? Stocks, and then we add the item. What is the item? The item is exactly the item that we got from the action. So we can just spread the item dot payload. So we have done that. So now we can just say return, what do we want to return? Stocks is stocks1. But there will be a slight problem here. Why? Because we have declared stocks1 here. So if we want this stocks1 to be available here, let's declare stocks1 here. So let stocks1 is equal to, let's say, null. And remember, because we are updating it, we are not defining it a const. So we define it to be stocks1, stocks1. So the value of stocks1 is now updated and we can return it. So this should do for our buy. Let's go ahead and test it. So we are getting an error at 24. Line number 24. So we called it stock1. So this should have been stocks1. Let's test it. Item is not defined, line 30. Now this is not item.payload, it should have been action.payload. We are pushing in the payload of the action. So this also helps us debug it. So now what is our state? Our initial state is this. Now let's give it a buy. And what is the buy? Name is, let's say, apple. Quantity is, let's say, 10. So now if I dispatch this event, the quantity of apple should become 11. And we get an unknown token here. Why do we get it? So because we did not define it. Payload should have been this. So this was a wrong. Now if I dispatch it, you can see the quantity has become 11. If I dispatch it again, it will become 21, 31 and so on. Let's now dispatch maybe an orange with, say, quantity being 25. So it should become 28, yes, 53, which is fine. Let's now put in a new fruit. Let's put in, say, guava, and let's put the quantity as, say, 6. So now this should get inserted. item is not defined. So we get an error somewhere in the code. Let's go ahead and check it. Why are we getting this? So is it using the earlier code? Let's check it again. Let's maybe refresh it. Now if we refresh it and we have removed that, so let's test it again for the new fruit. By payload is name is guava and quantity is say 6. So this should be a payload. It should add guava. We get guava 6. Now if we again buy 6 quantities of guava, it should become 12. Yes, this is what it's happening. Similarly, now I can just do a sell, and if I sell an apple, then what should happen? Apple should become 0 and it should be removed from this stocks, which is what we get. Now let's buy an apple. So let's buy, maybe quantity is say 4. Now we should get 4 quantities of apple and it should come in at the end, which is what we get. So this is working fine and we are using all the rules that we had defined while developing it. Next, what are we saying? Let the store design be the same for stocks, and we also have number of orders and total order quantity. We also want to maintain this in our store. And we have the same sell and the buy. So the buy and the sell remains the same. The actions remain the same. But what do we want? We also want these fields to get updated, and these would get updated only in the cell. So let's go ahead and implement it. What do we want? Number of orders. So number of times cell gets called, and total order quantity, which is sum of the quantities. In cell, we have just one quantity. We don't have a payload. So number of orders will be same as the total order quantity. Let's implement it. So here we also have number of orders is 0 to start with. Total order quantity is 0. So this is our initial state. Now in our cell, what do we need to do? So we will call our stocks. All the fields are getting updated. So do we need to spread it? Maybe there is no need to spread it. So we will just call here, when we return our stocks, we will just call it number of orders is state dot number of orders, or we can just destructure everything, stocks comma number of orders comma total order quantity from state dot stocks. So number of orders will be what? It will be number of orders plus 1. So this number gets incremented, and total order quantity will be total order quantity plus 1. So ideally speaking, the standard approach should have been, we should have spread our state and done these changes. So this is the standard approach. Ideally we should do that. Let's do the same way. In this case, we could choose not to do it because all the fields are getting updated, but let's follow the standard approach. So this is how the reducer for cell should look like. In the case of buy, there is no change, so this should work fine. Let's go ahead and test it. So this is our store. Let's now send a cell payload is name is say orange. Cannot read property map of undefined. What's the error? Let's check out. So the error is now happening because when we destructured it, we made it state.stocks initially we had said. So this should have been state. That seems to be the error. Let's go ahead and refresh, remove the error. This is the state. Let's put in our action. And now we are getting it. Orange have become 2. Let's dispatch it. Oranges have gone and number of orders is moving. We can dispatch a cell for a banana and this is also working fine. Next, what do we want to do? So we have a store design where we have stocks. We have all the orders in an array and purchases in an array. So instead of the previous store design, we have the array of all the orders and the array of all the purchases. The buy and the sell work identically. So we now want to implement this store design. Let's go ahead and do it. So the store design is orders is an empty array, purchases is an empty array. So which means whenever we make a purchase or whenever we have an order, we need to push it into these corresponding arrays, orders or purchases. So if we get sell here, so we don't need this. We don't have order and quantity. We will destructure orders here in the case of sell. So once we get that, let's spread our state. Stocks will remain the same. And we also need to handle our orders. So in our orders, we will need to insert an element. So let's define it. Let orders 1 is, the way we do it is we spread our orders and then we push in the last order. So let's define the JSON for it. So it will be name is, or we can just push in the action.payload. So this is the order. So we have pushed in and now we can just say orders is orders 1. So this should work. Now similarly in the case of buy, let's destructure our stocks and our purchases and let's remember to remove it so that the destructuring works. Now what do we need to do? At the end of it in purchases we will need to push it exactly the same way. So purchases 1 is equal to, we spread our purchases and then what do we push? We push our action.payload. That's our last purchase. So we have pushed it. Now what do we return? We will spread our stock. We will spread our state. Then stocks will become stocks 1. That is getting updated and purchases will be purchases 1. Orders will continue as it is. So those are the two changes we have made into our reducer. This should work. Let's go ahead and test it. So here we have the state. Let's do a cell, which is an order. Payload is, let's say, orange. Let's do a dispatch. Invalid or expected token. Where are we getting it? Type is cell. Payload is a JSON, which is name. So we forgot to put in the quotes. Let's dispatch it again. And we have gotten the dispatch. The number of oranges have reduced. And in the quantity, we get the first one. Let's now dispatch maybe a banana, sell a banana. So we are getting that the quantity has removed. We are getting that and so on. Let's now do a buy. So let's buy banana and let's say the quantity is 5. So remember here there are no bananas, so it should also get inserted here. So in our stocks we have gotten banana, in our orders we have them the same way, and in our purchases we have it. If we buy, let's say 8 bananas more. We get this as 13. Orders remain the same, and in purchases we get it. So this is working absolutely fine. So here in this video, we have seen how to do the immutable updates, and the 4 cases which are the most common cases we saw: update a JSON, insert an item in an array, remove an item from an array, and update an item in an array. What we also became more comfortable with is how to use the Redux dev tools to test it. There are other ways to test it, but initially if you are a beginner on Redux, this is probably a good enough way to get started. So write these codes on your own and test that out, and they will probably help you build a lot of clarity.